My brother declared me dead and stole $2.5 million, but when I appeared resurrected at my mom's wedding 3 years later, the revenge was epic, and he was left broken. I'm 30 years old. I work as a digital cartographer, and 6 months ago I found out I'd been dead for almost 3 years without knowing it. Sounds like something out of a bad movie, I know. But this really happened to me. And there are still days when I wake up thinking it was all a horrible nightmare. The thing is, my older brother, Caleb, literally erased me from existence while I was working in Iceland. And when I say he erased me, I'm not exaggerating even a little bit. Let me go back a bit so you understand how I got to this point. I always had a good relationship with Caleb. I mean, we had our differences like all siblings, but I never thought he was capable of something like this. He's 2 years older than me. He was always the perfect son, according to my mom. You know, the one who got good grades, the one who got married young to Jennifer, the one who gave mom a granddaughter. I was more the one who followed his own path, studying geography and technology when everyone expected me to go into medicine or law or something like that. It all started like 4 years ago when I got this incredible job in Iceland. A company needed digital cartographers to map remote areas of the country, and the pay was brutal, like triple what I was making here. The only problem was that I was going to be in super isolated places, without reliable internet, sometimes without cell signal for weeks. Basically, I was going to be disconnected from the world, but the opportunity was too good to pass up. I was 27. I was single after Hannah, and I broke up. I had no kids, and I thought, why not? Plus, I had inherited a considerable amount of money from my grandfather when he died, like $2.5 million, plus the house I was living in, and I needed someone to manage my things while I was away. That's where Caleb came into the equation. He offered to help me, said he could handle my finances, pay my bills, make sure everything was okay with the house. I trusted him, completely. I mean, he's my brother, right? So I gave him power of attorney over my accounts and properties. The family lawyer, Christopher, a guy who had worked with my family for years, prepared all the documents. Everything seemed perfect. Everyone told me how lucky I was to have such a reliable brother who could take care of my things. I left for Iceland in March 2021. The first few months were amazing. I worked in these landscapes that looked like they were from another planet. Huge glaciers, lava fields, waterfalls everywhere. I talked to my family when I could, maybe once a month if I was lucky with the signal. Caleb sent me updates about the house, said everything was fine, that bills were being paid on time. My mom wrote me emails saying she missed me but was proud of me. Everything normal, basically. But after like a year, communications became more sporadic. I was working in increasingly remote areas. Sometimes 2 or 3 months would pass without being able to connect to the internet. When I did, I'd check emails quickly, send a message to my family saying I was okay, and go back to work. I didn't have active social media. I was never really into that. My life was work, nature, and basically solitude. Looking back, that was exactly what Caleb needed. 3 years went by like that. 3 full years in which I was alive, working, saving money, planning my return, and it turns out that during all that time, to the rest of the world, I was dead, and buried. My family had held a funeral for me, my friends mourned me, my ex Hannah was apparently devastated. And all because my brother, the person I trusted most in the world, decided that my life was worth more to him than to me. The way I found out about everything was almost comical, if it wasn't so horrible. My camera broke in February of this year. I'd gone like 2 months without being able to communicate with anyone, and I needed a new one for work. I went down to Reykjavik, the capital, for the first time in months. I bought a camera, went to a cafe with Wi-Fi, and thought, well, I'm going to check my emails and maybe send my mom a message telling her I'm coming back in a few months. I opened my laptop, connected, and the first thing I saw was a Facebook notification from someone I didn't even know had me added. It was from Mason, a college friend. The notification said something like, 2 years since you left us, brother. We still miss you. And I'm like, what? I logged into Facebook for the first time in years, and there it was. My profile had been turned into a memorial page. There were hundreds of messages. Photos. People saying, "Rest in peace, Noah. You left too soon. I can't believe it's been 2 years already." I sat there in that cafe in Reykjavik, my hands shaking, reading my own obituary. According to the story, I had died in a car accident in Iceland in January 2022, over 2 years ago. There were photos of a funeral, photos of my mom crying in front of a casket, an empty casket, I guess. Photos of Caleb giving a speech about what a great brother I had been. I called Mason immediately, my fingers barely working as I dialed. He answered and went silent when I told him who I was. He thought it was a bad joke, like someone pretending to be me. I had to send him a photo of myself, right there in the cafe, with the day's newspaper, like I was a hostage proving I'm alive. He started crying on the phone, literally crying, saying, "I can't believe it. I can't believe it. Caleb told us you had died. There was a funeral. Your mom was devastated." I asked him about my mom, about my house, about everything. Mason told me that my house had been sold like a year ago, that the money supposedly went to pay funeral debts and legal expenses, that my mom had moved in with her new husband, Richard. New husband? Since when was my mom married again? That Caleb had handled everything because he had power of attorney over my estate. I sat there, in that cafe, in Reykjavik, literally on the other side of the world, processing that my brother had faked my death and apparently stolen my entire life. Mason kept talking, telling me things I couldn't process. At the end, he told me something that chilled my blood. "Your mom is getting married this weekend, Noah." Well, not your mom. I mean, your mom is already married, but she's going to renew vows with Richard in a big ceremony. The wedding is in 2 weeks. I don't know how I explained my situation to my boss. I basically told him I had a family emergency and needed to leave immediately. I took the first flight I could get from Reykjavik to the United States. It was the longest hours of my life, sitting on that plane, unable to sleep, thinking about everything Caleb had done, about how he had deceived our family, about what else he had done with my name, with my money, with my life. I landed like 2 days before my mom's vow renewal ceremony. I didn't call anyone, didn't warn I was coming. Mason picked me up at the airport, still in shock that I was really alive. He took me to his house. His wife almost fainted when she saw me. I spent those 2 days finding out everything I could. Mason helped me search for information, and the more we discovered, the worse it got. My house, the house I inherited from my grandfather, and that was worth like $800,000, was sold in September 2022. The money, according to public records, went to an account in Caleb's name as my legal representative. There were loans in my name that I never asked for, like $200,000 in credit card debt that I didn't know existed. All the money had passed through Caleb's hands, and now there was nothing. $2.5 million, plus a house, plus 3 years of savings from my work in Iceland, all gone. But wait, it gets worse. It turns out Caleb had also told my mom that the funeral cost like $400,000. What funeral? Cost that? And that he needed more money to cover legal debts that I supposedly had. My mom gave him $150,000 from her retirement fund. $150,000 of her life savings. Because Caleb convinced her that her dead son owed that money. The vow renewal was at a church on the outskirts of the city. Mason took me. We arrived when the ceremony had already started. I went in through the back doors of the church, and there was my whole family. My mom at the altar with Richard, who turned out to be a guy who seemed decent, like 60 years old, calm. Caleb was standing there as best man or something, with his wife Jennifer and his daughter Grace, my 10-year-old niece who I hadn't seen in years. There were like 100 people, family, friends, people who knew me. The pastor was in the middle of his speech about love and family overcoming tragedies, talking about how Richard had helped my mom heal after my tragic death. When I walked down the center aisle, the silence was instantaneous, like that silence in movies when everything stops. People started turning around, seeing me. Some people started screaming, others crying. My mom saw me and fainted. She literally fell. Richard caught her before she hit the ground. Caleb just stood there, pale as a ghost, the irony, and I could see the exact moment he understood it was all over. His face went from shock to panic in seconds. Jennifer, his wife, looked at me without understanding anything, like completely confused. I said, "Hi, Mom. Sorry I'm late to your wedding. I know I'm supposed to be dead, but it turns out I'm not, and we need to talk about some things. It wasn't the best timing, I admit, but after discovering your brother faked your death and stole millions of dollars from you, social etiquette kind of takes a back seat." What followed was total chaos. My mom was crying hysterically. She couldn't decide if she was happy I was alive or in shock about everything else. Richard, who turned out to be a super calm guy who had been a police officer before retiring, immediately understood that something very shady had happened. Caleb tried to leave. He literally tried to walk toward the exit, but Richard grabbed his arm and told him, "I think you should stay and explain some things." The ceremony obviously didn't continue. Everyone went to the reception that was already paid for, because what else were they going to do? But instead of being a celebration, it became like a massive family intervention. Richard called a friend of his who was still on the police force. My mom wouldn't stop touching my face, like verifying I was real. Jennifer took Grace outside because this clearly wasn't appropriate for a 10-year-old girl. Caleb at first tried to deny everything. He said it had been a horrible misunderstanding, that Icelandic authorities had notified him of my death, that he had documents. When we asked him to show those documents, suddenly he couldn't find them. Then, he changed the story. Said he really thought I had died, that it wasn't intentional. But when Richard asked him why he sold my house and emptied my accounts, he was out of answers. The next few days were a nightmare of legal investigations. It turned out that Christopher, the family lawyer, was in on the plan with Caleb from the beginning. They had forged a death certificate, an Icelandic police report, everything. Christopher had used his contacts and legal knowledge to make everything look legitimate. In return, Caleb had given him like $500,000 of my money. The investigation revealed the full magnitude of what Caleb had done. He hadn't just emptied my accounts and sold my house. He had taken out loans using my name and identity. He had used my good credit to get credit cards that he maxed out immediately. In total, he had stolen close to $3 million from me when you count everything. $3 million that he used to live a luxurious life, to buy things, for Jennifer and Grace, to invest in businesses that failed, to basically live like a millionaire. But what really destroyed me was discovering how far his betrayal went. During the investigation, they found old emails between Caleb and Christopher dating back to before I left for Iceland. They had already been discussing how to manage my estate in case something happened to me. I mean, Caleb had been planning this since before I left the country. He was the one who convinced me to give him power of attorney, who suggested Christopher as the lawyer for the documents, who sold me the idea that I needed someone trustworthy managing my things. And it gets even worse. Remember I mentioned Hannah, my ex? It turns out Caleb had been sabotaging that relationship from way before I left. We found messages where he told Hannah that I had been seeing other girls, that I wasn't trustworthy, that she deserved better. Hannah and I had problems. Yes, but I never understood why she suddenly stopped trusting me. Now it made sense. Caleb systematically destroyed that relationship because he knew that if Hannah and I were together, she would probably want to come with me to Iceland or stay in constant contact, which would ruin his plans. We also discovered that Caleb had intercepted my emails, especially during the last year I was in Iceland. When he had access to my email account and deleted messages from my family or responded pretending to be me. When my mom wrote to me worried because she hadn't heard from me in months, Caleb would respond from my account saying, "I was fine, just busy." He basically isolated me completely from my family while preparing the ground for his plan. Jennifer, Caleb's wife, was devastated when she found out about everything. She really didn't know anything, I swear. She thought Caleb had gotten lucky with some investments. That's why they suddenly had so much money. When the evidence of what he had done started appearing, she fully cooperated with the investigation. She found documents that Caleb had hidden in his home office, copies of the fake death certificate, records of bank transfers, everything. The day they arrested, Caleb was surreal. They did it at his house, in front of Jennifer and Grace. Grace, my niece, didn't understand what was happening. She just saw her dad being handcuffed and put into a police car while her mom cried. Part of me felt horrible for Grace. She wasn't to blame for anything, but most of me just felt rage toward Caleb for putting his own daughter in that situation. Christopher, the lawyer, was arrested the same day. He immediately tried to throw Caleb under the bus, saying Caleb had forced him, that he had threatened him, but there was too much evidence of his voluntary participation. The emails between them showed it had been a joint plan from the start. The trial was a media circus. The story of man returns from the dead to discover his brother faked his death and stole millions from him was on all the news. I couldn't go anywhere without being recognized. Random people would stop me on the street to tell me they'd seen my story on TV. It was horrible. Honestly, I just wanted it all to end. During the trial, even more things came out. Caleb had been living in a house he bought for $2 million with my money. He had 3 luxury cars. He had spent like $300,000 on family vacations in the last 2 years. All with my money, while telling everyone I was dead and that he was honoring my memory. The sickest part is that Caleb had created a charitable foundation in my name. Supposedly it was to help young cartographers or something like that. He raised like $200,000 from people who wanted to honor my memory. And guess what? All that money also went into his pocket. He was literally profiting from my fake death in multiple ways. My mom had to testify about the money she gave Caleb for the funeral. It was heartbreaking to see her there, admitting she had given her life savings to her son because she believed she was honoring her other dead son. Richard supported her through everything. He's a good guy, honestly. I like him, and I'm grateful he was there for my mom when she thought I was dead. Jennifer also testified against Caleb. She filed for divorce immediately after the arrests. She said she couldn't be married to someone capable of doing something like that, and that she had to think about Grace. Caleb tried to keep her from getting full custody, but considering he was going to prison for a long time, he didn't have many options. There was a moment during the trial where Caleb looked directly at me and said, "I did it because you always had everything easy. You were Grandpa's favorite. You got the big inheritance. You had the incredible job." As if that justified what he did. As if stealing millions of dollars from me and faking my death was a reasonable response to his younger brother complexes. Ironic because he's the older one, but he clearly had issues. The jury didn't take long to find him guilty. Fraud, identity theft, document forgery, manipulation of public records, and like 10 more charges. Christopher was also found guilty in his own trial. Both faced decades in prison. But here's where things got even crazier. Caleb was placed under house arrest while awaiting sentencing. He had to wear an electronic monitor on his ankle. Like 2 weeks after the conviction, his monitor stopped giving a signal. He cut it off and escaped. He just disappeared into the night. Everyone thought he had managed to flee the country, that maybe he had money hidden somewhere and had managed to get to Mexico or Canada. But Jennifer did something incredible. She started going through every corner of the house they had shared, every document, every record. And she found something. Plans to withdraw money from offshore accounts we didn't even know existed, and a fake passport in someone else's name. But she also found something more worrying. Documents about Grace's custody. Caleb had been planning to kidnap her and take her out of the country. He had plane tickets reserved, forged documents saying Jennifer had given up custody, everything. Jennifer called the police immediately. Richard, with his contacts from when he was an officer, helped coordinate the search. They alerted all borders, ports, airports, and like 4 days after his escape, they found him. He was at the Canadian border, trying to cross with the fake passport. They caught him when he tried to access one of the offshore accounts from an ATM on the US side. The escape attempt and kidnapping plan added like another 5 years to his eventual sentence. The final sentence was brutal for him. Between all the charges, including the escape attempt and attempted kidnapping, they gave him 25 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole for at least 15 years. Christopher got 18 years for his part in the fraud. Now comes the part of trying to rebuild my life. Legally, getting all records to reflect that I was alive was a nightmarish process. My death had been officially registered, so they had to reverse all of that. It was like being reborn bureaucratically. Financially, Things are complicated. They sold his house, his cars, everything he had bought with my money. The offshore accounts had like $1 million, but the rest just disappeared, spent on things that can't be recovered or hidden in places we'll never find. It's better than nothing, I guess, but it hurts to know I worked so hard, that my grandfather worked his whole life to leave me that money, and almost half was lost due to my brother's greed. My relationship with my mom has been complicated. She feels guilty for having given money to Caleb, for having believed his story. I keep telling her it wasn't her fault, that Caleb manipulated us all, but she carries that guilt. Richard has been incredible, with her, helping her process everything. I see why she fell in love with him. He's a good man. Jennifer and I have become close in a strange way. We were both victims of Caleb in different ways. She lost her marriage and has to raise Grace alone now, explaining to her why her dad is in prison. I lost 3 years of my life and millions of dollars. We support each other, like we meet for coffee every couple of weeks. We talk about how to deal with everything. Grace is the one who breaks my heart the most in all this. She's 10 years old. Her dad is in prison for horrible crimes against her uncle. Her life changed completely. Jennifer is doing an incredible job raising her, and I try to be present as an uncle. Grace is innocent in all this, and I don't want her to carry the shame of what her father did. Hannah, my ex, contacted me after everything came out in the news. We met for coffee and talked for hours. She cried when I told her how Caleb had sabotaged our relationship. She said if she had known the truth, she never would have left me. I don't know what's going to happen with us. We're taking it slow, getting to know each other again after all these years. Maybe there's a second chance there. Maybe not. For now, it's enough to have her back in my life as a friend. I established a real foundation to help victims of family financial fraud using part of the recovered money. I felt I had to make something good come out of all this garbage. The irony of using the money Caleb stole to help other people in similar situations isn't lost on me. Going back to work has been weird. Obviously, I didn't go back to Iceland. That part of my life is over. I got a local job doing digital cartography for a company here. It pays much less than Iceland, but at least I'm close to my family. I can see my mom when I want. I can be present in Grace's life. Caleb? I haven't talked to him since the day of sentencing. I have nothing to say to him. Jennifer tells me he's tried to write me letters from prison, but I throw them away without opening them. Some family members think I'm too harsh, that I should consider forgiving him eventually. But I don't know if I can. He didn't just steal money from me. He stole 3 years where my family believed me dead, where my mom mourned my absence, where Hannah moved on without me. Those things can't be recovered, no matter how much money he returns or how many years he spends in prison. Last week, I had a conversation with my mom about all this. We were having dinner at her house, just the two of us. Richard was working late. She asked me if I'm ever going to be able to get over it. I told her the truth. I don't know. Some days I wake up and almost forget it happened. I go to work, I see friends, I live my life. Other days I remember that I was legally dead for 2.5 years, that my brother planned to take away what life I had left, and I want to scream. Mom told me something that stuck with me. Caleb took 3 years. From you, Noah, but you have another 50 or 60 ahead if you're lucky. Don't let him take those too. She's right, I guess. I can't spend the rest of my life being the victim of what Caleb did. I have to find a way to move forward, to build something new with what's left. Yesterday, Grace asked me if I'm ever going to forgive her dad. I told her I didn't know, but that it wasn't her fault anything he did. She hugged me and told me she loved me, that she was glad I wasn't dead. And in that moment, I realized that maybe that's enough for now. Not being dead. Having people who love me. Having a second chance at life. Literally.